Election day just 4 days away, and the races for Westchester and Nassau County executives could have a lot in common. Call it the Trump effect. We will explain. Then sentencing day for Bo Bergdahl. We're going to tell you the punishment for the Army sergeant who went AWOL in Afghanistan, then spent 5 years in Taliban captivity. Also, a day off in the Senator Menendez corruption trial. We will take a look at the pivotal week in the New Jersey Democrats' case and what may happen next. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you for joining us this Friday evening. As I said, Election Day, it's coming up this Tuesday, and a guy who's not even on the ballot, well, let's just say he'll be a major factor. I'm talking about none other than our president, Mr. Donald Trump. The case in Westchester County, believe it or not, where a brand new poll that RNN and the Journal News and LoHUD just put out shows Democratic challenger George Latimer and Republican County Executive Rob Astorino in what we'll consider a statistical dead high given the margin of error. Now, just under half of all Westchester voters told us that the Trump administration is, I repeat that, is impacting their vote for county exec. And of those voters who say Trump is a factor, well, those voters, they are breaking for George Latimer by a more than 2-to-1 margin. Now, out on Long Island, the race to replace County Executive Ed Mangano is a tight one. Republican County, they decided not to run the county exec, not to run for a third term. That after he was indicted on corruption charges, a common theme. And Republican Jack Martins, he's facing off against Democrat Laura Curran. Now, each candidate, they've released internal polls showing themselves in the lead. Nonetheless, though, tighter than a lot of people would have thought. And finally, another closely watched race out of our region down in Virginia. That's where Republican Ed Gillespie and Democrat Ralph Northam are running for governor. And just like we see in Westchester, Trump's shadow apparently casting a long one over the race. The poll is extremely tight, and 40% of voters say Trump will play a role in their decision. And trust me, what happens on Tuesday will have a major impact for candidates running in much bigger numbers next November. All right, let's bring in our panel. Phil Reisman, radio talk show host on WVOX, and before that, an institution. You like that? Or put him in one. No, at the Journal News, a columnist there for so long. One of our favorites, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, back from New Jersey. Scott Vanderhoff, a former 5-term Republican Rockland County executive and now co-chairman of the Palisades Institute of Dominican College, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Listen, I'll admit, Phil, I was a little surprised by the numbers in that Trump, a much bigger impact, and personal issues, of which there have been many in this campaign, and which turned into a really bruising one in Westchester, don't really rate that highly as when it comes to importance to the voters. They seem motivated. Now, I know it's an off year. We'll see what the turnout will be, which will decide this. But nonetheless, what happens in Washington doesn't stay in Washington.
Well, you know, I saw that aspect of the poll. It was like 5%, you know, and it may be that most people just don't really know about them.
Well, they've been bombarded by ads. I mean, yeah, Mercer's money, it's $1 million he's poured into this thing in support of Astorino, but it really doesn't seem to be turning the tide. And we're going to find out Tuesday, but nonetheless, this thing really tight. Astorino, you know, he's won by double digits the last two races.
That's true. You know, it was 2013, and the other one was 2009 against Andy Spano, and that was Spano fatigue. And 2009 was an interesting race because that was a whole sweep of Republicans that came in.
It was the first introduction to the Tea Party, too. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Governor Christie, Mangano, you know, in Nassau. And now we're kind of like flipping around, and Trump is as I call it, the great pumpkin looming over the Halloween season, you know. And, you know, he got 31% of the vote in Westchester, Trump. That means 69% did not vote for him.
Yep.
They're mad. They want to get even.
But in the past, Scott, issue number 1, 2, and 3 were property taxes, okay? And people, at least historically here, with Rob Astorino, was I always think always an underestimated candidate, but nonetheless, he managed to say, well, it's kind of church and state. You can feel how you feel nationally, politically, but if you want your property taxes, I'm your guy. This time, there seems to be a pivot, and we're seeing it in other places too. I don't think this is a season you want to run as a Republican.
No, most of us try to hide often. but no, it's a difficult time. And I'm surprised by the numbers. You know, I really am. And I'm guessing, that when it finally comes down to it, they'll still vote local. They'll still, when they actually go, they may be angry with Trump, they're upset with the whole concept, whether it be Republican or Democrat, but I have a notion that when they actually go in to vote, that Astorino will get the votes and probably win by a little, which, by the way, may or may not help his career if he wants to run for governor. That's a whole nother issue.
That's right. And that, obviously, next year.
But there's one other factor in that I think we may be overlooking, which is how many more Democrats are going to turn out to the polls, particularly in Westchester and Nassau, who might otherwise stay home because of Donald Trump. It's not necessarily that it's going to tilt the numbers much further, although we would all, we all know these races, and if Trump wasn't a factor, Astorino would be winning by a much larger margin. Jack Martins would be winning by a much larger margin. And we expect Republicans to win in both Rockland and Orange County as well. But there will probably be an increase in Democratic turnout. The question is it a big enough increase to tilt the scale in favor of Astorino?
And to me, one of the more important things to note here is it's not that George Latimer isn't a flawed candidate. I mean, he's had a brutal last couple of weeks, which to me speaks volumes. Here we are, call it a toss-up if you want, with the margin of error, with a candidate that's had terrible headlines about his personal life, about paying taxes, about getting his car booted, and all the kind of things that don't usually play well in a local election. But clearly people are angry right now. And even issues, Dominic, like the gun show showed up as a major issue in the poll, which to me surprised me. And this is, and again, I see some of the same things in Long Island playing out. We're seeing them down in Virginia playing out. I know all politics are local, but if I was a Republican, it's funny. Rob Astorino has tried on selective issues, and he's not alone, Republicans, to distance himself from the president, but yet not completely distance himself from Donald Trump, because there is a base, wherever you are, of Republicans. I don't think, maybe after this coming Tuesday, that'll be the approach from other Republicans, let alone what happens in the next 12 months come next cycle. I think either you can't be half pregnant on this. You're either a Flake, Jeff Flake here, or you're Bob Corker, who I'm not with him. But you can't kind of be like, well, on some things I am, some things I'm not. I think people will hold it against you.
Tuesday will be a telling sign, Richard. I'm with you in terms of your assessment. If I'm a Republican incumbent, the last thing I want right now is Donald Trump. He does have coattails, the opposite coattails. And what's more interesting, as already been alluded to, voters, it seems, based on polling, are going to make Republicans pay for Trump by taking it out against them. And Andrew's right. I think we're going to see a more excited base. Folks that would stay home, perhaps that stayed home during the general election that elected Trump, now realize the stakes and they're going to turn out.
I'm going to ask you to first guess this one. Sure. Traditionally, I think 4 years ago, the turnout was around 34%. I might be off.
33.
33, okay. Right. Do you think they hit 40 this time?
That's a really good question, and it goes right to the heart of the question. It's not just an off-year election, it's an off-year election.
Right.
So, and in a county where
you got to really want to vote.
Yeah. Overlooked in this is that there are a number. Everybody always says there's 2.5 times enrollment. Democrats. There is more independents, small I independents, enrolled in Westchester than Republicans. That's a whole group of over 130,000 voters. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they vote for. Because we always look at this as a party thing, and there's a lot of people with believe that they're independents. I don't think it may make that only because of the Trump factor, which has been the speculation since I wrote about this back in June. That can they motivate Democrats to come out and vote? And that means there's a vast group of people in Yonkers and Mount Vernon, places that are pretty much important to a Democratic candidate.
It's never too early to look ahead to the next election, and 2018 is a midterm election. Imagine being John Faso in the Hudson Valley, or Dan Donovan in Staten Island, or Leonard Lance in North Jersey, or even Lee Zeldin and Peter King on Long Island. Maybe not so much Peter King. You can't just be an anti-Trumper. You can't say I'm breaking completely from Trump. Why? You'll be primaried and you won't win your party's nomination, so you'll be booted out of office earlier than you would have if you had decided to stick with him. And I'm not necessarily sure that you can be a pro-Trump guy for the primary and then distance yourself from him going ahead to the general election. It's an amazingly difficult position for these Republicans next year.
It is, but I get the sense almost that the electorate is almost visceral in their reactions. You know, one terrorist attack or one really major, another mess up by Trump, and it shifts again. And you may have a higher turnout. They react. It's almost like the news cycle is so quick that if something happens between now and Election Day, and it rains, who knows?
It looks like it'll be a sunny day, by the way.
And see, you get free weather prognostications here from Mr. Westchester. Now, I will tell you, there are other races, exactly, Joya, that, New Jersey, it's just the betting line is, does he win by 20, even if he wins by more than 10? But there haven't been candidates, even on the Democratic side, that are, don't have to run on the Republican line, that have really stood out here as future rising stars. To me, I'm telling you, if George Latimer wins, that is a message far beyond even the state of New York that I would pay attention to very carefully if I was a Republican. You have tons of money buying up every available ad spot for the Republican incumbent. You have a flawed Democratic candidate run against him with an awful last 2 weeks for a closing argument. And if he loses, wow. I think we'll be talking about this. But again, we'll know more come Tuesday evening. Now, I will tell you that on Monday, our next program that we'll bring you here at Election Day, I'll be making some endorsements in the key races in our area, including Westchester County Executive, Long Island, Nassau County Executive, New Jersey Governor, and even the mayor in New York. Hold your nose on that one. All right, coming up next, President Trump now saying he would love to get involved with the FBI and the Department of Justice. Hasn't he already? He's already fired the FBI director. But anyway, he's now saying this as the Russia probe heats up. So buckle up, everybody. It will be a very bumpy ride.